This episode of AHLA Speaking of Health Law is brought to you by AHLA members and donors like you. For more information, visit AmericanHealthLaw.org.
Welcome to today's episode of Speaking of Health Law, brought to you by the American Health Law Association and the Early Career Professionals Council. The Early Career Professionals Council is a forum for the discussion of issues pertaining to early career professionals and students in the healthcare and health law world. I'm Alé Dalton, and I'm your host for today. I'm a partner at Bradley, where I get to help clients navigate deals and day-to-day operations in a highly regulated industry. I also have the privilege of serving as the chair of the Early Career Professionals Council. Today's episode is all about the life of healthcare associates at large firms. Our guests for today are Tenia Clayton, who's an associate at Baker Donelson, and Caroline Abbott, who's an associate at Greenberg Traurig. We hope this conversation will help showcase the opportunities available to law firm associates and early career professionals who might be interested in becoming law firm associates and focusing on healthcare law and what life looks like in this role. Please note that the views expressed today are our own and not that of our employers. So without further delay, welcome to the podcast, y'all.
Hi, thanks for the welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Okay, to start, Caroline, could you share a little bit about your journey into health law and what drew you into this area of practice? I think you have a little bit of a unique fun fact about yourself that I think our listeners might find very interesting.
Yeah, happy to. So I grew up in Nashville. I am currently based in Washington, D.C., but as a result of that, I very much grew up in the healthcare space. With my mom it was a general counsel, chief legal officer in-house at several different hospital systems and provider organizations. And I very much grew up, under her desk. Quite literally, with my colored pencils and goldfish. And so I really had kind of an exposure to this kind of law from a very early age, that was an option, that it's not just litigation and corporate exclusively in those big categories. And, the rest of my family is likewise in healthcare in some capacity. My dad was a nurse, and my grandmother was the lead at the radiology tech of one of the more prominent physician practices in Nashville. So I had that kind of exposure very early on, but I also had exposure not just to the fact that you could do health law, but that there was just such a range of what you could do in health law. Like, you can do corporate, you can do labor and employment, you can do, just all of these range of things, that it wasn't just these kind of really, really high level categories that you could take a path on. So
that's great. Thank you. I love that fun fact about your mom. And I had a chance to meet her at the AHLA Transactions Conference earlier this year, and it was really great to see both of y'all practicing and doing your thing. Tenia, could you share a little bit about your journey into health law and what drew you to this area of practice? I think something that our guests might find, or our listeners might find interesting, is that you sort of went in with that focus and got a chance to really focus your law school classes on health law. So we'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think my story is similar to Caroline's in that I maybe got some exposure to health law sooner than others, but it's different from hers, which I also love because we're kind of highlighting the different paths that people can take. And so I'm a first generation law student, currently a fifth year associate in Baker Donelson's health law practice group, also from Nashville. So that's another fun fact about this group. But anyway, I spent my entire childhood saying that I was going to be an anesthesiologist specifically. I don't know why. I think I just thought that, it was an important job and would set me up for the kind of lifestyle that I wanted. But turns out I hate science. So my pre-med dreams quickly went out the window. But I did my undergrad at Emory University, and, Emory is basically right down the street from the CDC. And so it has a very heavy public health presence in Atlanta. And so I changed my major to human health. And so that's where I started to get an interest in more of like a healthcare policy and a legal standpoint. And then from there, just wanting to move back home to Nashville, Belmont actually has a health law certificate program. So I was able to kind of early on get some exposure to fraud and abuse, corporate issues. We have a healthcare transactions moot court team that I participated in. And I think all of that really helped set me up for, this career in health law. And again, just being in Nashville with it being such a heavy healthcare town, it all kind of just fit into place that way. So I love that our stories are a little bit different, but I think Caroline and I also came to health law a little bit sooner than maybe some others may have.
Yes. And if you are someone who's listening and feeling like, oh my goodness, am I behind because my mom or my parent is not a law lawyer, or, I didn't go to a law school or didn't study or major in anything related to health, just know that I'm proof that you can definitely do it while at a law firm, not really knowing anything about health law, similar to y'all. I'm based out of Nashville. And so as a summer associate here, it was impossible to miss the presence of healthcare as an industry and a potential opportunity as a rising or an aspiring lawyer. And so that's sort of how I fell into it. Certainly wish I would have had more access to, health law classes and all the fancy things that I feel like law students have now. Though my law school offers a certificate now as well. And so it's really cool to see how it's developed into this practice area that a lot of folks know about early on as they start their careers. Tenia, could you share a little bit more about how you got your job at your firm and any experiences that helped shape your career direction? You touched a little bit on that while being at Emory and that access to the CDC, but how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, so back in my day, five
You
years
can
ago.
say that. I feel like
um,
after 5 years,
yeah,
you're
back
allowed to say
back in
that.
my day, it was not as common in Nashville to have 1L summer associates, and so I started to feel a little bit behind, kind of like you said, because I didn't do a big firm role until my 2L summer. Um, but that's where I found Baker Donelson, and I split my summer. Again, back then it was more common to do a shorter program and split between two firms, and so I was between two firms here in town, and both have great healthcare practices. Both would have been, a great start. But what really drew me to Baker was so I came to Baker through our summer associate program, but I had also received our diversity scholarship. And so that really highlighted for me, some of the values and the culture that I was looking for, and some of that collegiality that I was looking for. And all of that has like continued to, be reflective of my current um, work environment. And so I've been happy with the choice. I always kind of say it was the easiest yes, aside from when I got married. So don't regret either of those choices. So
Love that. That's great. Caroline, what about you? I feel like you had an interesting path to your current role at your firm. I'd be curious to know sort of how did you end up, especially as a Nashvilleian, ended up in DC, which is also, of course, a really great city for healthcare, but looks a little bit different from how Tania and I ended up here in Nashville.
Yeah, yeah. So I kind of had to remain open-minded. When I went into law school, I was not dead set on a market like, oh, I'm going to DC and I am going to be singularly focused on DC. What really happened was COVID. And that really disrupted all kinds of hiring processes, the number of people that were hired, the timing of the hiring process. You could do things earlier. They threw out all the rules about timing, and so it was it was the wild, wild west in many respects. And so I kind of had to pivot, adapt, really take kind of initiative in terms of talking to a lot of different people that I might not have actually considered doing if I absent such a kind of disruptive event. As a result of that, I kind of expanded my geography, and having gone to Notre Dame, that was definitely an opportunity that was available to me, given just the fantastic like the network of people that are so willing to help you. Notre Dame's really good about that. So Chicago was still on the table. Atlanta, another southern market, was on the table. Just where could I launch my career? And so DC ended up being one of the most viable options for me. And so, after having spoken with a lot of folks at the firm, I felt like it was going to give me the opportunity to kind of leverage my three-legged stool of my undergrad being international relations politics, and my law degree, obviously, and then my MBA in finance and strategy. So I felt like that was going to just DC was a good place to be able to leverage that. The firm in particular, with its healthcare practice, sophisticated, corporate life sciences, all of those types of things, the different angles on healthcare that you might not, well, I certainly was not necessarily exposed to when I was growing up. It was very hospital system centric. It's very provider side centric, understandably. But it did kind of broaden my just horizon, I guess, in terms of what was actually available in this broader category of healthcare, not just healthcare, provider side, healthcare, just all of the different dimensions that can go into it. And so that was really attractive to me. And so I was like, what better place to be where the action's happening.
Absolutely. And I want to get to both of you sharing about what your typical day looks like for our listeners. But before we get to that, I think both of y'all have touched on sort of the unique factors that impacted your journey in being able to get your role at the firm. And we would obviously be missing the elephant in the room if we didn't mention COVID was such a huge shaping factor for both of you. Tenia, you sort of became internet famous is maybe not the right phrase, but a little bit as someone who took the bar immediately while having a newborn, like shortly after, because the bar kept getting pushed back. And so there was some challenges presented, obviously, with that. I think maybe you even had remote law school. I'm not sure if I'm missing the timing there, but Caroline, then you sort of were impacted by some of the recent changes as well that have happened with hiring timelines and what that all looks like. And so for our listeners, obviously, thankfully, we're not in the same exact setting, but I would say that for a lot of folks, things have changed and things are up in the air. And some of these early career folks listening today might really benefit from both of y'all's wisdom on how to navigate, how to have that resiliency that you were talking about, Caroline, when you are facing a job market that's either unprecedented, your job that you thought you might have might not exist anymore, and how can you leverage your skills that you do have to get yourself in the door?
Yeah, so I would say, I mean, one, there's, like I said, I think staying open-minded for one, because you can't plan out every single aspect of your life or your career. In fact, I'm still, even as a second year, I am still, I get work that is another kind of wrinkle on that I might want to add that to my repertoire. I might not. I might be like that doesn't excite me or whatever. But I'm still adapting. I'm still open-minded. I'm still kind of keeping my eyes and ears open about just opportunities that might be available, down the road or right now. So I think one, it's like, I mean, if you're very committed, if you know yourself better than anybody. If you're like, I'm going to Idaho Falls, Idaho, no questions asked. Okay, go for it. You know what I mean? But I did think that when you face these types of challenges, really, to kind of be willing to let it take you where it takes you. And you're capable of tackling that. I mean, sure, the self-doubt will creep in because the timing doesn't happen the way you thought it was going to happen. I think I would imagine that OCI, OCI was in my year was COVID fiasco, frankly. I would imagine OCI, don't be discouraged if OCI is not where you land your forever home. That's a great opportunity, but I actually didn't get my position through OCI, and it was again just like not letting that what could be perceived as a setback, that you just reach out to folks. That was one of the best advice I can give in terms of getting a job, but also once you get into the firm, just establishing relationships and visibility with people that. It's trial and error a little bit. You're like, this person's great to work with. I like their work and that kind of thing. And you only do that by reaching out to people and just picking their brains. It's not a transaction. It's not, it's not like, oh, well, like you give me this because I'm only self-interested. It's truly just like kind of that initiative, but you do have to have kind of a certain degree of confidence in yourself. And that I think we all have to remind ourselves of frequently. that because we're all new to it. I mean, I know that it seems like I come into this with so much experience and I got to witness, an expert navigate
Your
all of this,
mom.
but in many ways, I'm brand new to it. My mom actually never worked at a firm, so she interacted with firms, obviously, extensively, but that's not, a guidance that she can give me on like from personal experience. And so there's still all of that. That's like, you made it here for a reason. You should have that some confidence. Someone looked at you and saw your potential, and to kind of own that. Yeah, stay humble, but also, you got yourself there with your hard work and diligence and persistence and things like that. So I think it's a lot of those kind of soft skills, because the technical stuff of law is not like, nobody expects you to know all of the technical stuff when you walk in the door. They just expect you to control the controllables, effort and attitude, as it were.
Yes, love that. Tenia, on resiliency and effort and attitude, I feel like you embody that so well in your journey,
Oh
not
my
even
gosh.
before you were a health lawyer, while you were trying to get licensed, you had a
Yes.
lot
Oh my
happening.
gosh. No, I honestly have to echo everything Caroline just said, because I know as lawyers, we are risk averse and we want to plan everything out A to B and we want to account for everything, and you just can't do that. So yeah, I graduated law school 2020. Um, I had it all planned out. I was going to have my baby. I was going to take the bar, or no, I was going to take the bar and then have my baby, have some time off, and all of that went out the window. I ended up taking the bar online at Baker Donelson, with a 6 week old. And it was a scary time because I know some people were like losing their job offers, or like Caroline said, they might have been getting, pushed back. And so it's really just like Caroline said, you got to stay open. Anytime something like this comes your way, it's an opportunity for you to shape what you want that narrative to be. And I could have said, oh, this isn't going to work. It's going to be too hard. I just need to defer to the next bar, blah, blah, blah. Um, but like Caroline said, we did hard work to get through college, to law school, through law school. And so it's just a matter of reminding yourself like, oh, I can do hard things. And this may be something I haven't faced before. Um, but I do have something to contribute and I can overcome things. And so the more you do that as well, you get more confident in yourself that you can do it again. And so I just agree with everything Caroline said. And again, about shaping that narrative, like Ali said, it was all over the internet that I took the bar with the baby with the benefit of a smart bassinet. And now our firm is offering that bassinet as a parental leave benefit. And so I just kind of like use my experiences to try to, you know, help other people and get them through a tough time. And so yeah, I love hearing about, other people navigating some of this as well, because it just lets people know you don't have to do a 1L summer and then repeat there and then do. So there are a lot of different pathways to get to where we are. Um, and again, it's just up to you to kind of shape what your story is going to look like. So definitely just be proactive and open, but it is scary. I will acknowledge that, but
I appreciate both of you being so candid about your experiences. I remain convinced that your generation is so gritty and so resilient because precisely of all these things that have happened and all the things and all the changes that keep happening in the world. And so it's really exciting. And I love that both of you are folks who are taking those experiences and helping mentor others and change things for others so that, the next batch of folks who has to face those challenges has it maybe a little bit easier, or at least has some guidance to navigate it. Okay, I think most folks who are listening to this podcast probably want to hear about what does a typical day look like for you as an early career associate in a large law firm focusing on health law. What is your day to day? Is there a typical day? Tania, do you want to kick us off?
yeah, I will start this off. For us, at least at Baker, our young associates will typically do kind of a mixed bag of transactional and regulatory work before they start to kind of declare their major, as I call it. I'm someone that still does a decent mix of transactional and regulatory work. So I'll just use today as an example. I am running diligence on a hospital acquisition. And so I'm interacting with different, like Caroline said, healthcare is a ton of things. So I'm interacting with healthcare regulatory partners, benefits counsel, all these different people to pull together diligence review for this hospital deal. And then I have a niche area of my practice related to organ donation. And so that's a really specific area that I get to work on, where I might be, navigating different regulatory issues that they face or different regulatory filings that they have to do. Um, so to answer your question of whether there's a typical day, there's not really. My husband is a teacher, and so he's like, okay, I go from period 1 to period 2 at this time, and I do that. And he gets very stressed about the fact that I'll say, oh, someone just dropped a call on my calendar for 30 minutes from now. And he's like, how do you live this way? But I think part of that like spontaneous aspect is what keeps this, interesting and on your toes. Again, the law is always changing. Clients will change the facts. And so some of that adaptability that we've been talking about in life is, applicable to our work as well. I'm on a couple of mergers where they have just changed what they're trying to do like 3 times. And I'm like, okay, so before I send you before I send you the agreement for a 3rd time, please confirm this is what we're doing, and that this is the timeline we're working with. And so again, it's just a lot of different things like that. But I do appreciate that healthcare is still very broad. So even if you've kind of narrowed down an industry, there's still so much out there that you can get your hands on. And at Baker, we definitely have that wide open for associates to dip their hands in. In our corporate group as well, again, being in Nashville, they all touch healthcare deals every day as well. So even if you're someone that maybe doesn't want to focus specifically on healthcare and you want to do corporate, there's still a benefit to getting some background and some insight into different industries such as healthcare, just so you understand clients' business when doing, deals or something for them. But so yeah, lots of different things might happen in a day for me. But lots of calls, lots of reviewing contracts, lots of drafting policies, just a lot of different things.
Yeah, I love it. Caroline, what about you? What does your day look like as a second year?
I can concur that that there's the cliche that there is not like a standard day. I so similar to how Baker does it. I mean, I would say GT is particularly entrepreneurial. You can kind of craft a practice even as a second year that is pretty your own. I mean, you're always going to do stuff that comes across your desk, like that, not that you sought per se. But you can start to like really craft that. And so like, as of today, I'm working on, so I actually do sit quite, do a lot of like pure corporate work in addition to, it's corporate. It's corporate in the sense that it's like actually, some security stuff, some governance stuff, things like that, that are to serve, healthcare clients, but also, more of that hybrid, regulatory transactional, like that Tenia noted. And so like, as of today, I'm on several deals, that are distress transactions. Which again speaks to the diversity that you can do in a healthcare practice. Because the margins on a lot of these healthcare providers are not necessarily that gargantuan. They are no margin, no mission, but still, and so they struggle, some of these. So I, have been working on several transactions, that are out of foreclosure, where they bundle these properties, these assisted living facilities, independent living facilities, et cetera, and sell them, as together, when the previous operators, weren't able to operate them in a way that was profitable. So I've been working on those deals, which includes, just drafting those agreements, corresponding with the client on those, trying to make sure that all the legal descriptions are tracked down, like all of that kind of stuff, because they're kind of combined, real estate and operations sales. And then, but then switch gears to drafting a consent for a simple agreement for future equity, which is, a lot of these life sciences clients, especially when they're first getting started, it's very expensive. They need money. And so they go and get these from investors. And so it's a lot of that kind of governance work that is that's very, very detail oriented. Have to go back and read those bylaws that everybody learned about back at the very beginning of law school, those types of things. So yeah, and then obviously just emails and calls and trying to field all of those types of things in terms of, and I do have to sometimes find a little time to block off undistracted time for that. But yeah, there's not really for drafting and just the deep thinking, but yeah, so there's not really a standard day, but that's actually part of the thing that's so attractive about working in a practice that's more of an industry focus, unlike something that might be, I know everything about this particular statute and I will litigate the heck out of it for the rest of my career. But you have this diversity of like, if you want to do distressed transactions, there's opportunity for that. If you want to do life sciences, early stage investing, you can do some of that. If you want to do, provider side deals, you can do provider side deals. If you want to do, dig really deep into reimbursement regulatory, you can do that.
There really is so much breadth to it. And I think the large firms, I think that is maybe the best thing or one of the best things of being at a large firm, especially, both of y'all are in practices that have very robust healthcare offerings. And so you really do get to dip your toes on, into everything. And I think that is something that really serves early career folks really well. And to your point, Caroline, I think people are surprised when large firm lawyers mention the entrepreneurial nature of a lot of our practices. But I would say that because there is such a breadth and depth to everything that's available at the firm, you kind of get to decide, write your own adventure and really explore and develop those niches as you're interested, which I think makes it a really fun and dynamic practice. I don't know if we always think it's fun, but I think overall it comes out in the wash as something that's really fun and interesting. So obviously this is an AHLA sponsored podcast, so we'd be remiss to not chat about how you guys got involved with the AHLA, what it has meant for your career, some highlights that you might have had. I know both of you have attended different conferences that AHLA and educational programs that AHLA has hosted. So I would love to learn a little bit more about why y'all chose to get involved and what that's looked like for you. And Tenia, you can kick us off.
Yeah, I can jump in. If I'm not mistaken, I might have even started following AHLA as a law student.
I believe that.
Yeah, and Transactions is one of the conferences that is typically in Nashville, and so it's very accessible to me and very encouraged by our firm that we participate. But it's always just such good content. AHLA has really good resources. And similar to the podcast we're doing now, there are opportunities for young lawyers to start to build, a name for themselves. So I've done a couple articles with AHLA that have, just kind of helped me get some experience on, marketing and business development. But even on a substantive note, the resources have just been really helpful over the years. So even when I'm not able to get to some of the conferences, we will have one of our associates kind of report out and share, documents or PowerPoints that were spoken on at the conference. But so there's all of that. There's, great substantive resources, great opportunities for young lawyers. And it's also a really good way to meet other people. I know there are people I met at my very first transactions conference that I still keep in touch with now. And I think that's really cool. And you look forward to seeing each other every time and just start to build that community, which was something that has been a priority for me, primarily because my first year was all remote everything. I've been really trying to, take advantage of things where I can to get out there and travel some, just because I didn't have that opportunity that first year because of COVID. And so I don't know if other people, my years sort of feel a little behind, but to the extent I can get in there and go to some more AHLA events, that's definitely something high on my my radar, and also that the firm definitely supports, just because, it's always, great content, great community, and things like that. So that's my 2 cents. But yeah, AHLA has just been ingrained in my workflow from the very beginning. It was like a never question that I would get involved with it. So just happy to continue doing things like this and finding different ways to, because like we said, the firm is choose your own adventure. AHLA is also choose your own adventure. So you can go to different conferences, you can write, you can speak, there's all these different things that you can kind of get plugged in.
Caroline, how did
I
you
agree
get
with that. There's all of the above, retweet. So yeah, I actually got involved in AHLA in law school. I met a fellow Notre Dame grad, Rob Gerberry, and now we have like a little Notre Dame reunion at all the different AHLA
I love
conferences.
this.
So, and I'm always prioritize the AHLA Transactions Conference, especially. Selfishly, it's also a way for me to get home to
Your
Nashville.
family.
But it's a great conference, and it's timely, and they always have, like I think 2 years ago, like the emphasis of just the macro environment was a lot of baby HSRs. And this year with the different kind of regime change or whatever, it's a lot of like antitrust. It was very timely, and you get, and it's a range. It's not just if you are young and all of this and not as fluent in the language, as it were, then there's something for you. If you have something that's like my mom, we went to this conference together. Well, not together, but we did, and she
Y'all
has
hung out at the conference. That's
we
how I
hung
met.
out at the conference, and she gets to see, things that are really timely for her, who is beyond fluent in the language. And I am still, learning a lot of this stuff and some of the more sophisticated structures and things like that she's going to go and see that. But if you're somewhere in between, there's something you can take out of all of these speakers. They're so knowledgeable. It's a great way to get to know people and reconnect with people. I mean, I reconnected with Allie at this conference. But also you just meet new people that are, the last conference I got invited to like a little dinner, just like on a whim from one of the booth people, because we got to talking, and it was like 2 degrees of separation of, how we knew, you name it. And so that kind of organic stuff that just takes place. And so I really encourage people, if you have any interest in it, in healthcare law, in whatever capacity, to just explore AHLA, early in your law school career or anytime thereafter. Because the resources are fantastic. The publications are fantastic. They're very useful. I mean, when I first started, one of the things that a fellow healthcare associate who started in regulatory and transitioned to transactional, but he really liked that. He was like, I really got a command of the regulatory before I moved into the transactional. And one of the things that he recommended, he was like, take that fundamentals book and read it. He said, because nobody's doing that.
Yeah.
Nobody's reading that. Cover to cover as just like an introduction to this. And one, you get so much information, and two, you get to kind of like, what of this stuff is interesting to you? And so I would, relay that to a new person that might be interested in it, is one, just plug into it and just like, by osmosis, kind of find your people, the resources that are helpful for you. And then, if you really are like just completely don't know if healthcare is for you, I don't know if you want to read the fundamentals book, but if you're early on and you're like, I think this intrigues me. I think I want to, then I would take that as well, because it is a way to kind of just quickly absorb information in a really, really, and it's updated, and they're really good information. I mean, also you can just read it as you come across issues. That's another way to do it. Like, I know they have like various surveys, and you just like, when you're working on something and it's a specific question, you tend to like just be so zeroed in on that. It's like, oh, maybe just read a little bit more, paragraph before, paragraph after, or this whole section. in this, the California corporate practice in medicine, or whatever
I feel like
section.
all of us live by that 50-state corporate practice of medicine book. It's a popular one.
I would
But
be disbarred without that book. I would not make it without that book.
I'm looking over here directly in my line of sight. I have all those, and I will make a plug for it. There is the
Yes.
AHLA Fundamentals of Health Law book, which back in my day, that one did not exist. So now it's a handy book instead of sort of the fundamentals binder, though I still print out the fundamentals binder anytime I get to
Mhm.
attend fundamentals. But Fundamentals of Health Law for our listeners is a conference that we have that it really is geared more towards the early career folks. And it's kind of what it sounds like. You go and you get an intro to all things healthcare. But I have gone even as, a slightly more seasoned lawyer, and I still learn a lot of things. It's so helpful. And then transactions, which you both mentioned, is a really popular one. It's here in Nashville, and folks who do transactional work for healthcare clients gather, and the content is so good. I feel like everyone was at the tax training during this last conference. But AHLA also has an acronym book, and I know we did a podcast episode with the author, and that is kind of what it sounds like. It demystifies the alphabet soup of health law acronyms, which we love our acronyms. And so there's so many resources that can make you uh, just really expedite, to your point, Caroline, that learning process, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel because someone who came before you has nicely compiled it for you. The Corporate Practice of Medicine book is also really popular. There's so many resources. And chances are, I think to sort of the core of this episode where we share about what it's like to be at a law firm, at a large law firm, one of the great things is just access to those resources. So I'd be shocked if we don't all have the same sort of core library accessible to us of all those AHLA products. And oftentimes, if for some reason your firm doesn't have one, you can order it, and it's something that the firm wants to get for you. So we would encourage you, if you are a listener who is at a large law firm, please don't hesitate to ask for those AHLA resources. They're so great, and chances are that your library probably actually has them available for you. Okay, the other thing that we get a lot of questions about on law firm life is firm culture and work-life balance, which I think that some folks who have not experienced law firm life can be a little bit spooked by sort of this thought of, big firm, lots of people. What have your experiences been like working at large law firms? And what do you think really folks, what would you encourage folks to look for as far as like finding a culture? Obviously, we would imagine if you're interested in healthcare law that you would look for a firm that shines in that space. But taking that as a given, what do you think makes that firm culture piece really something that helps you thrive as an early career professional?
I mean, I think for me, like you said, challenging healthcare practice was kind of a given for all the Nashville firms. And so I had to look beyond that. And I had just recently gotten married when I was doing my summer associate positions. And so I was kind of thinking through, okay, is this a firm that has a lot of parents? And particularly in our healthcare group, I wanted to know, like, are there a lot of parents in this group? Like, is it possible and feasible to, to do this work and have a family? And also just looking at what does the firm kind of offer to support parents? Like, for example, we offer like breast milk shipping if I have to travel for work, and we have like emergency childcare reimbursement, and different things like that that just make it possible to be able to have a family and still do this work. Something to also be asking about and thinking about are billable hour requirements. Some firms are not as strict about it. Some are like, you have to hit this number. So those are just some things you want to think about because that will kind of shape, the culture and how things operate. For me, it took me a little bit of time to like get my head around, okay, I need to do X number of hours, but what does that break down to per month, per week, per day? Um, Thinking because this is a very unique job in the sense that I could be at work, all day. I might be there 8 hours and 5 of those were billable or 4 of those were billable. And so I'm like, well, I did everything you told me to
Yeah.
do. But my hours are bad. It's like, so it's very challenging to like get over that hump because
Yes.
it took me a while to be like, well, I'm doing everything they said and I'm going to the meetings and I'm writing the articles. Um, but you still have to do the billable hours. So just kind of thinking through, what does that look like? And I have found that it's very helpful to plan out those days that I know are going to be a 2 hour, 3 hour billable day, or even if I have vacation, go ahead and just write a zero for that week and, calculate around it. Because you're not going to just fall into the goal accidentally. Yeah, you're not just going to
Your
fall
hours.
into it. And you don't want to be like me, pretty much a couple years in a row where I'm at the end of the fiscal year scrambling to to fit it all in. So my recommendation is definitely to ask some of those questions about what the requirements are. I know we also have a non-billable expectation, and so doing things like this is encouraged and monitored. So just getting a sense for the firm's priorities and making sure they align with your own, because the firms are interviewing you, but you're also interviewing them. And so have choices and want to have choices about where to go. And so looking for some of those questions. I also asked a little bit about, what programs do you offer for minorities and women? And just some of those things just really shape what the environment is like. If I, ask someone, this may be a white man, and if he can't tell me anything about the firm's women's initiative, then or diversity efforts, then that is maybe a sign that it's not a firm-wide priority. And so just asking some of those questions in a tactful way can get you, some answers. When was your last vacation? What was the last movie you saw? Different things like that. Exactly,
What do you like to
exactly. If
do
they
outside
have
the
no
office?
answers, red flag. Red flag. I don't like it. So a lot of that, and I have been happy that, I was not in any sort of bait and switch. So I was happy to find that to the extent you can,
Yeah.
Baker is a really good environment for work-life balance. But again, I have kids, and so that is often out the window at my own at my own choice. But anyway. Yeah.
No, I totally get what you mean. Caroline, how about you? What would you say to folks who might be a little spooked by the prospect of joining a large law firm? How can you suss out both that firm culture, but also how can you manage that work-life balance from the early days? I feel like you're
Mhm.
probably in the thick of establishing what that looks like for you as a younger associate.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things that you kind of have to, at least once you start. So the evaluative process of the firm itself, it's of course it's important to understand billable hour requirements and understanding that sometimes there's unspoken billable hour requirements at certain firms, and to see kind of what's the tone about transparency. That's one of the ways, and that might not be in your interview, but
Right.
you could like just talk to
Your
people
due
like from people.
diligence.
Yeah, people from your undergrad or law school that had landed there, or people that you otherwise know that might give you sort of some candid information about what it's like there. That's not just a sales pitch like the bait and switch part, because that is something to kind of keep your eyes and ears open for. I know there's a tendency to be like, oh, just like the desperation of getting a job, you know, which I feel like in this environment is very real. I mean,
Oh,
like COVID
absolutely.
was real. That was very real. But also keep your values and like look and see. I mean, the best thing that you can probably do is just really have to the extent you have, over the last few years, established like some sense of clarity around what your values are. That's kind of look for those and look for proxies for those values. Like I went to a happy hour after work, with a new prospective, like internal client. Like he has some corporate work, things like that, where he might, and it's just like a very candid, normal conversation. We're not talking too much about work. We're both evaluating each other a little bit, but you just listen for that, listen for the values, the proxies for values. He was talking about how he was like a seventh year associate at a very, very large, prominent, like white shoe law firm. And he was like, my wife, I was in the grocery store and she hadn't seen me for a week. And she was, trying to juggle all these children, and he has to take a call because he's on a deal. And she'd had enough, you know? And he said, just in passing, he was like, well, my family is more important than my job. So I decided to figure out what was a better fit, and he found something that worked for him. But it's those kind of subtle, just in passing type of things that people say when you get to know them, to determine if this is one, the right firm for you, but also is this person the right person to work with? Because one of the advice that I got when I was in high school, actually, that I think is transferable to this environment and it was actually to choose a small school versus a large school. And the advice was, you can make a big school small, but you can't make a small school big.
Yeah.
And I think that, and I didn't grasp all of that, the meaning of all of that when I was, 17 or whatever. But even at a large law firm, there's also like, what team are you going to be working on? Who are those people? Because they will influence your life and your career trajectory, certainly, but your life in the meantime, a lot more than some, the collective 3,000 people or whatever that are involved in, however large your law firm is. And so it's important to, yes, understand those kind of the top-down pressures from the administration, but also what's the composition of this team? And when you look up the chain, do these people have a life that you think is something that you would want to model your life in part off of? You might, it won't be 100%, but but when you look up the chain, is that something that you would want for yourself? Because you do kind of eventually start to establish like your cadence kind of aligns with their cadence and that kind of thing. And so if there's not an alignment, if they have a life that you're like, on paper, that looks really great, but just doesn't really align with my life, with my values that I've established or whatever, then I think that's really important. But it starts with some degree of clarity on what those values are, for you to listen to what those proxies for those values are, because you often cannot just you
Yes.
can't be that forward about it. You can be bold. I encourage people to be bold
but you
about
might not get
asking
the
for.
answer. You might not get an honest answer. So I do
Yes.
think that
Yes.
your suggestion
Yeah.
of proxies, which I think Tenia
Yes.
also sort of
Yes.
spoke of.
Tactfully ask. Yeah.
Yeah, yes. Okay, well, as we start to wrap up your time, I would love to know if you guys could go back and tell your undergrad selves one piece of advice. It doesn't necessarily have to be around health law, but just generally think about where you are today. If you could go back to then and let them know that things worked out well and to keep one piece of advice in mind, what would you guys say to yourselves? Tania, do you want to kick us off?
I think it would have to kind of go back to something we said earlier, which was like, don't get too caught up in your ABCD plan. Having those values, like Caroline said, can guide kind of where you're headed. And uh, that being said, it's okay if it doesn't look exactly how you thought it would look. I did not expect to take the bar in a room by myself at a firm. I did not expect to have my offer delayed by a few months. All these different things were not how I envisioned them. I also didn't even envision being a lawyer at first. And so just kind of trusting that those values and the hard work that we put in will kind of get you where you need to be. Um, because otherwise you'll stress yourself out getting hung up on timing and expectations and different things like that don't have to be the focus. The focus is the success that you're crafting for yourself every day. And that's definitely something that I have struggled with and struggle with still. So I'm talking to myself as much as anyone. But yeah, just staying flexible, like we said at the beginning, will make you comfortable with where you are and where you're headed.
I love that. Thank you. Caroline, what would you tell undergrad Caroline?
I think I would pose a question to Caroline.
Oh,
I think it
okay.
would be, yeah, I would say, because I think one of the biggest things that is like speaking to the values earlier, is really kind of listening to yourself. Because this profession and, in law school and all these things, there's a track and you think you have to follow it. And there's a lot of noise. People tell you this is, that you have to do this if you want to get to here. If, you have to do, you have to do, you have to do. And so but you can't discern which ones of those are for you and which ones are not for you if you don't really kind of have a core understanding of, what you want and that type of thing, and not making decisions purely off of fear. And so I think that's critical. And so the question that I would ask myself probably, or the first thing that comes to mind is, what would you do if you knew it was all going to be okay?
Oh, I love that. I feel like we all need to hear that today.
Because it frees you up to really kind of be bold where you should be bold, and make those decisions and that align your life with what you want it to be. And that's a very individual exercise. Like, unfortunately, I can't get on here and be like, this is what everybody should do, because everybody's values are different. Their priors are different. They come to the table with different things, hopes, dreams, fears, etc. But that's what I would ask myself, because, and I think that also aligns well with what Tenia was saying, is like, it provides you with additional flexibility. Like, you don't have to, there's no one prescribed successful path in health law, in law generally. If you get on a track and you're like, this is not the track for me, get off the track. Even if all these people that are at high up and they're telling you, this is catastrophic. You have to do it this way because this is how we did it 20 years ago. And there's a track and you have to follow it. If you don't like the track, get off the track.
I love it. Yeah.
But you can't make you can't have that kind of
No,
wisdom really if you haven't really done that kind of, just you and your thoughts inside
I
in
love
your home, without the
Yes,
noise of outside influence all
asking,
the time.
asking yourself that question is very healthy. Okay, well, how can listeners connect with you guys or learn more about your work?
Go for it. I mean, I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me usually liking Allie's post. So if you just look at her,
And vice versa.
look at
You'll
her
find it.
recents, and you'll find me, Tania Clayton, on LinkedIn. I like to share kind of where I'm headed and what I'm up to on there, including conferences like transactions. So
Yeah. And Caroline, I feel like similarly with you, I assume, if folks
Yeah,
want to reach
well,
out.
likewise, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'll Caroline K. Abbott, and and obviously on the firm website, you can look me up if you wish.
Yes. Learn more
If
about
you're
your
going the
practice.
formal route, but always available and accessible on LinkedIn. Likewise, we've interacted with like and Allie's posts, all the LinkedIn influencers these days, legal influencers. So yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn.
It's a good community out there. Well, thank you so much, Tania and Caroline, for sharing your stories and your wisdom with our listeners today. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in today. If you're an early career health law professional, we'd love to connect with you and share more about the volunteer and networking opportunities that are available to the early career professionals through AHLA. We'll see y'all next time.